On my 21st birthday, my parents slid a single $50 bill across the table and said, "Your grandma sent this." I remember the hum of the fridge, the plastic forks in a mug, the way the sheet cake tasted like sugar in silence. My name is Morgan, 35, and this is the moment I learned how family can spend your name. A month later, my grandmother asked, calm and clear, "Did you get the $10,000 I sent for your birthday?" My throat went dry. I only got 50. Her palm hit the table. The forks rattled. The harm wasn't a mistake. It had fingerprints. My parents. My signature. Somewhere. Without me. But my grandmother held the ledger and the law, and she wasn't afraid to open both. Have you ever realized that family fairness can hide a debt you never agreed to? The thing about growing up in my family was that quiet meant safety. No shouting, no arguing, just a steady hum of, "We're fine." I learned early that keeping peace was my job. My parents liked to call me the dependable one, which sounded sweet until I realized it meant the one we can take from. When I was 16, my brother Mason got braces, new shoes, and a week at the beach because, as Mom said, confidence matters for college. When I cracked a tooth playing basketball, she said, "It builds character." I worked at a diner by then, tips smelling like ketchup and burnt coffee, and each time Dad saw the roll of bills in my pocket, he'd say, "Proud of you, sweetheart. Family helps family, right?" That line was always the cue. Gas money, grocery cash, temporary loans that never came back. By the time I turned 21, I'd stopped keeping track of what they owed me because seeing the numbers made me feel foolish. I told myself they'd make it right someday, that they were struggling. But deep down, I knew better. I'd become their safety net, their quiet ATM that didn't charge interest. Grandma was the only one who ever looked at me like she saw the weight I carried. She had a calm kind of authority, the kind that doesn't need to raise its voice. When Grandpa died, she told me, "Fairness isn't about splitting things even. It's about keeping your soul clean." I didn't understand then. I do now. When she slammed her hand on the table that night, it wasn't just about the missing money. It was about all the times I'd been told to stay quiet, to be mature, to let things slide. My parents froze, caught between denial and fear. Mason stared like he couldn't decide which side he was on. Ivy, my younger sister, looked at me with wide eyes that asked if she should speak or disappear. And me? I just sat there, the air buzzing around me, realizing that the whole system, the trust, the money, the roles, was built on my silence. And for the first time, I didn't want to be quiet anymore. The days after that dinner felt stretched thin, like the air itself was waiting for something to break. Grandma's words hung in the house like incense, heavy, impossible to ignore. I went to work as usual, smiling at customers, balancing plates, calling out orders, pretending my life wasn't unraveling behind the register. But when I came home, everything had changed. Mom avoided my eyes, moving through the kitchen in clipped, silent motions. Dad whistled too loud, the kind of noise people make when they're hiding something. Mason joked like nothing happened, calling me Miss Accountant, like catching them had made me uptight. Ivy watched me in quiet, nervous loyalty, unsure which version of the truth she was allowed to believe. Inside, I was torn between guilt and rage, two sides of the same coin I'd been paying with my whole life. Every time I thought about that $10,000, my stomach twisted. It wasn't just about the money. It was the proof that my parents had signed my name like it belonged to them. They'd done it so smoothly, so naturally, it almost made me question my own memory. That's what manipulation does. It teaches you to doubt yourself before you ever doubt the people you love. At the restaurant, I started noticing details I'd ignored before. How I apologized even when customers spilled their drinks. How I smiled to make others comfortable while I shrank inside. It was all the same pattern: appease, absorb, survive. The same way I'd handled my parents for years. One night after closing, I sat in the break room staring at my phone. Grandma had texted, "Lunch tomorrow? Bring your bank statements." My heart thudded hard enough to make my hands shake. I didn't know what she planned to do, but I knew she was serious. She didn't slam tables for drama. She slammed them for justice. When I arrived at her house the next afternoon, the blinds were open wide, sunlight spilling over a stack of papers on her kitchen table. She'd already printed everything: transfers, signatures, dates. My name appeared in black ink beside my parents', over and over. There was even a joint account I'd never seen, one that said "Custodial for Morgan" in the header. Grandma tapped her finger next to the forged signature. "Is that yours?" I shook my head. My throat burned. "I didn't think so," she said quietly, taking a photo with her phone. "We'll fix this, but you need to be ready." "Ready for what?" I asked. "For them to call you ungrateful," she said. "For them to twist it. For them to make you feel like telling the truth is a betrayal." Her words landed like anchors, heavy, grounding. I realized she wasn't just preparing me for a legal fight. She was preparing me for emotional war. When my parents' car pulled into her driveway that evening, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't the background kid anymore. I was the one sitting beside Grandma, both of us facing the door. And when it opened, I knew exactly which side of the table I belonged to. The sound of the front door opening felt like a movie cue, the quiet before the storm. My parents stepped in without knocking, as if that act alone could reclaim control. Mom wore her polite smile, the one she used on neighbors and church ladies. Dad's eyes darted between me and Grandma, calculating angles like a man trying to sell a bad car with a fresh coat of polish. "Mama," Mom started, voice sweet as syrup, "we don't need to make this a scene." Grandma didn't look up. "Where is it?" She asked. "Where's what?" Dad replied too quickly. "The $10,000 meant for Morgan's 21st. Her voice was soft but steady, the kind that could slice through marble. Dad chuckled, the way he always did when cornered. "Oh, come on, you're misunderstanding how the trust works. We used it for family expenses. We'll make it right." "Expenses," Grandma repeated like she was tasting something spoiled. "Whose family?" The silence after that question could have cracked glass. I sat frozen, heart pounding so hard it felt visible. Mom pressed her hand to her temple, murmuring about headaches and confusion. Mason shifted his weight from foot to foot, hands jammed into his hoodie. "It went to all of us," he said quietly. "For Mason's business. For the house." "For the house?" Grandma interrupted. "Then why is it under her name?" She pointed to the paper in front of her. My forged signature glared up from the page like a scar. Mom looked at me. "You don't understand, sweetheart. We handle things for you. You're too young to manage the paperwork." I felt something click in my chest, like a lock unfastening after years of rust. "I'm not too young," I said. "You forged my name." Dad's jaw tightened. "Watch your tone," he snapped. "We've done everything for you." "No," Grandma said, rising slowly. "You've done everything to her." Her cane tapped once on the floor. The sound echoed, sharp and final. "You will transfer the full amount back to her account today," she said. "You will remove your names from anything tied to her. You will stop treating her as your personal line of credit." Mom's voice trembled into sugar again. "Mama, please, you're not thinking clearly." "I may forget my glasses," Grandma said, "but I don't forget theft." For a moment, the room filled with the hum of the refrigerator and the distant ticking of the old clock above the sink. It was a sound I'd grown up with, but this time it didn't feel like home. It felt like evidence of every quiet I'd swallowed. Dad's shoulders squared. "We are not doing this in front of the kids." I looked at him and finally said what I'd been carrying for years. "We already are." He stepped closer, but I didn't flinch. Something inside me had gone still, clear, unshakable. "I'm not signing anything else," I said. "Not your papers, not your lies, not the role you wrote for me." Grandma nodded once. "That's my girl." And just like that, the ground shifted. Not loud, not dramatic, just a deep, quiet change that couldn't be undone. That night, I barely slept. My phone kept lighting up. Calls, texts, voicemails, stacked like a storm I refused to open. "You broke your father's heart. We forgive you. Come home and talk like family. Guilt is a patient hunter. It waits for silence." But Grandma had told me what silence was for. It wasn't surrender. It was focus. The next morning, she called me before sunrise. "Bring your coffee," she said. "We're meeting Samuel." Samuel was the trustee. Grandpa's old colleague and one of the few people my parents couldn't charm. When I arrived, the kitchen table was already lined with folders and a small notary stamp beside them. The morning light poured through the window, cutting across Grandma's determined face. She didn't speak in long sentences, just instructions. "This," she pointed, "is your new account. Only your name. No joint access." "And this?" I asked. "The report," she said, handing me a folder. "Every transfer your parents made under your name." I flipped through it slowly. Pages of withdrawals labeled household reimbursement, business startup, tuition advance. Mason's name appeared twice, Mom's handwriting on receipts I'd never seen. Each line felt like an old bruise pressed again. "Do I have to press charges?" I asked quietly. Grandma's eyes softened. "You don't have to punish anyone. You just have to stop letting them take." By the afternoon, the trustee had frozen my parents' access to every trust-linked account. Grandma stayed firm but calm, never gloating, never cruel. Watching her, I understood something new. Strength didn't have to shout. It could just refuse to bend. When I got home later, Dad was waiting on the porch. His arms were crossed, his expression the same one he used on customers who asked for refunds. "You think this is victory?" he said. "You embarrassed this family." I told the truth, I replied. "You've always been dramatic." "Maybe," I said, "but I'm done being useful only when you need me." Mom came out behind him, holding a casserole dish like it was a peace offering. "You'll regret this, sweetheart," she said softly. "Family doesn't survive without loyalty." "Loyalty isn't obedience," I said, "and survival isn't peace." She blinked, not used to hearing me speak like that. I think she saw for the first time that I wasn't bluffing. The following week, I moved out. 2 car trips, 1 box of clothes, 1 stack of papers labeled mine. Grandma helped me find a room above a bakery downtown. The rent was modest. The windows stuck when it rained. It was perfect. I paid the first month with my own debit card, not one my parents managed. I left the receipt folded in my wallet like a declaration. For a while, I expected them to come pounding at my door to demand I undo everything. But they didn't. The silence that followed was heavier than shouting, but it was mine. At the diner, life went on. I refilled water glasses, memorized orders, laughed when I meant it. People at work noticed I stood straighter, that I didn't flinch when someone said my name. One afternoon, Grandma stopped by and sat at the counter, smiling like she'd known this version of me all along. "How does it feel?" she asked. I thought for a moment, like breathing through clean air. She nodded. "Then keep breathing, Morgan. That's the real inheritance." And for the first time in my life, I believed her. It's been over a year since that night in Grandma's kitchen, the night she slammed her hand on the table and handed me back my name. Life is quieter now, smaller in some ways, but solid. I still work at the diner, but I also help with inventory in the back office. Numbers make sense to me. They don't lie or guilt or rewrite history. Every paycheck, I move a little into savings. Every boundary I hold feels like interest finally earning itself. My parents still send messages sometimes. Holiday invitations, family meetings, apologies that sound more like reminders. We were under pressure. "You've always been so independent." I read them, then pressed delete. It doesn't hurt the way it used to. You can't wound someone who's no longer waiting to be chosen. Grandma and I have lunch every Tuesday. Always the same soup, always the same laughter about something small. How the waitress forgets her lemon. How the world keeps spinning, whether people tell the truth or not. She tells me Grandpa would have liked my steadiness. He believed peace isn't found, she says. It's built. One rule, one no, one quiet act at a time. Some nights I sit in my small apartment and think about the old version of me, the one who flinched at every request, who thought love meant giving until there was nothing left. I want to tell her this. Peace doesn't come from being needed. It comes from being known. I still keep that $50 in my wallet, folded tight, not as a scar, but as proof. Proof that I once accepted too little and that I never will again. I don't need revenge. I don't need their apology. What I needed was to learn that closure is not an apology. It's a door you close yourself. Have you ever had to choose peace over approval? If this story touched something in you, share it with someone who might need that same reminder. And if you believe calm strength can change everything, leave a like, subscribe, and stay with us for more stories of quiet power and justice without revenge.